Hello and welcome to Mr. Roberts History. Today we are going to be looking at the question, why and how did the Normans invade and conquer Britain? So there's actually a lot going on in that question. First of all, we've got the why. Second of all, we've got the how. Then we've got the invasion. Then we've got the actual defeat of the British, the Anglo-Saxons. So there's actually so much to talk about. So let's jump straight in, shall we? First things first, let's make sure we're clear on the terminology. When we are talking about the Anglo-Saxons, we are talking about the tribes that ruled England at this time. When we're talking about the Normans, we are talking about a duchy in France, the Duchy or Dukedom of Normandy. So the people from Normandy were called the Normans. This is essentially an invasion of England by France, but it's slightly more complicated than that. So we need to know why this invasion took place in the first place, and we need to understand how it worked. How was it carried out, and why did they win? So let's jump in. First things first, what was England like in this era, in Anglo-Saxon times? So the entire population of England was about 2 million. Just so that we're aware, the entire population of the UK at the moment is about 67 million, and the entire population of just England is about 54 million. Or to put it in another perspective, the population of London, depending how you measure it, of course, is about 10 million. So the population of all of England is 2 million. So it's a very sparsely populated place. And what did everyone do? Not everyone literally, but about 95% of the population farmed land for a living. That's what they did, okay? And it's a very religious country, and in particular, a very Christian country. So much so that that influences the king at the time. We'll come to that again in a moment. Now, for many years up to this point, because we are going to be looking at the invasion of 1066. For many years, in fact, for centuries up to this point, England had been under the threat of invasion of the Vikings, from the Vikings, we should say. So this had been coming from places like Denmark, Norway, Sweden, and technically speaking, the Normans themselves are descendants of Viking settlers in France. So we could call this another Viking invasion as well. At the time, the king that I was referring to earlier is a gentleman by the name Edward the Confessor. Now, he ruled from 1042 to 1066, although some of that was in exile. That's a topic for another video. But he's king of England for a long time. But before that, the king before Edward the Confessor was a Viking, King Canute, and his two sons, who had been Vikings. Now, England is actually a very well-organized nation for the time. And this is one of the reasons why it was so prime for invasion. Because of this organization, it made it a vast source of wealth. So what was it like? It basically went like this. At the very, very, very top was the king. Now, this is the king we're talking about, Edward the Confessor. Beneath the king, you've got these very powerful people called earls. So this would be the equivalent of your dukes, I suppose, or your counts or vice counts, whatever way you want to do it, but your lords, if you will, your barons. So it goes king, then earls. Underneath the earls are the thanes. Now, these are your local lords. Now, if you've seen the show, it's kind of like in Game of Thrones, okay? So I'm going to use the example of the North. The North is ruled over by House Stark, but within the North and House Stark, they have their bannermen. These are local lords that respond to and follow the orders of House Stark. That's like the Thanes. So the Thanes do what the Earls do, or Earls tell them to do, and the Earls do what the King tells them to do. So if you've ever seen Game of Thrones, this explains it very well. And beneath all of these high-ranking people are the peasants. This is the majority of their population. Now, within these groups, there's still a little bit of a hierarchy as well. So there's some peasants that are free to move about the country, free to go work for another lord if they want. And there are some peasants that are not. They are tied to the land they live on. Okay, it's like living in permanent lockdown. And of course, below all of that are slaves. At this time in Anglo-Saxon England, about 10% of the population were slaves. Okay, so within these peasants and merchants, they could go up their way, they could work their way up the social mobility ladder, but you could also work your way down. You could sell yourself into slavery, earning money for the rest of your family, but of course, that would mean that you are permanently on the bottom tier. And of course, if an earl is not doing particularly well, they could be demoted to a thane, and a thane can be promoted to earl. So we've got kings, earls, thanes, peasants, and slaves. I hope that all makes sense. Okay, now getting back to Edward. The question we're looking at is how and why. So how and why were they invaded? So Edward is part of the why, because Edward was quite a powerful king. He ruled all of England. He had a very strong army. Now, when I say powerful king, he himself wasn't the greatest warrior, but he was able to select, I suppose, his earls quite well, his thanes quite well, and arrange the organization of his military so that it was particularly strong. He's very much respected as a lawmaker, and his name, Edward the Confessor, comes from the fact that he was considered to be very pious. So that's the advanced way, that's the high level way of saying he's very religious. He was a very pious king. So the name Edward the Confessor was because he went to church so much and confessed all of his sins that's what he did. He was Edward the Confessor. Imagine if someone, all they did was make baskets, they'd be like Edward the Basket Maker. Okay, Edward the Weaver would be what you would call them actually. But in this case, he goes to church so much he gets the nickname Edward the Confessor. So everyone had to swear an oath to this king, and the king is at the top of the social system. However, Edward is not all powerful. There are some limits to his power. So half the country still follows this thing called the Dane law. They were still very strong connections to the Danish, to Denmark. This is due to the Viking invasions and settlements that had taken place in the centuries beforehand. And there is an earl, the Earl of Wessex, a man by the name of Earl Godwin, who was very, very powerful, very, very influential. Now, Edwin and Godwin fell out in 1050, and Edward forced Godwin into exile. He returned in 1051 with an army, and Edward gave him his earldom back to prevent war. So we've got this, perhaps a schism, if you will, in terms of what's going on within England. So that's what England is like, Anglo-Saxon England. And that's why it looks like, hang on, if we put some pressure on here, outside forces, outside nations, we put some pressure on here, we might be able to take over this place. Because even though they're very, very successful, they're showing some signs that they may be vulnerable as well. So then we get a problem. Edward the Confessor dies. Oh my goodness. And because he died, he'd been king for a long time. He'd been king for 24 years. But when he died, he did not have a son. There was not an automatic person to take over from him. So we've got 4 people that decide to step in. We've got Edgar, known as Edgar the Atheling, or Edgar Atheling. Now, technically, he is of royal blood. He's a descendant of a previous king of England, but he's not a direct descendant or a direct heir to Edward. So the strength of his claim on paper is pretty good, but he is a very young man. He's only 15 years old. And because he's only 15, a lot of the earls and thanes aren't really backing his claim. And so because of that, he's not able to rally the army around him. So his chance of success is not very good. Then we've got this gentleman, Hadrada. Now, he is actually a descendant of King Canute, the former Viking king of England, and he thinks that makes him the rightful heir to England. Now, this claim is not particularly strong, but what gives him a good chance of success is he has a gigantic army. Now, remember, we're going gigantic by 1066 standards. So this is what he thinks is what's going to give him the chance to become king of England. Then, of course, we've got this man, Harold Godwinson. Now, if you remember from our previous discussion, the powerful Earl, was a man named Earl Godwin. Now, this guy, Godwinson, is literally Earl Godwin's son. That's how he got the name. Godwin's son, Godwinson. So this is the son of the Earl who had challenged Edward when he was alive. So he's the son of the most powerful Earl in England. He is actually appointed the successor by the king on his deathbed, or at least so Harold Godwinson claims. Now, this gives him a very strong claim to the throne, because some witnesses said, yeah, we heard the king say he should be king. And also, the Witan, which is a council, they've also selected Harold Godwinson to be king. So it looks like this is settled. Harold Godwinson absolutely should be in charge. Until we get to this gentleman, William of Normandy. Now, he had an agreement with Edward from many years earlier. Edward had apparently said, you can take over from me if anything ever happens. And supposedly, Harold Godwinson had also sworn to support William of Normandy and his claim to be king. He also has the support of a very important gentleman by the name of the Pope, the head of all Christendom. Now, remember, like we talked about, it's a very Christian time. People are very Christian in their values, but also thought that that's the way you rule the country. So getting the support of a Pope is good. So he actually has a very good chance of success. He's a very capable military leader, but he has to actually cross the English Channel. He has to invade the country in order to pursue this claim. So Harold is actually crowned king at this time, and he heads up north to make sure that everything's going okay up there. And he puts together the largest army England had ever seen. Now, some of this army is patrolling the Channel, some of this army heads north. So this is our contenders to be king. This is also why we end up with an invasion, because after Edward the Confessor died with no children, Harold Godwinson is like, no, I'm the most powerful. I should get to be king. Now, he's not a blood relative, though, but the other nobles support him. He had also been a leader in the army, and he was very experienced. Supposedly, Edward named him to be king, so this is what he says. But William says, no, I am the closest living relative to the king, and the king has died. I should be made king. He also claims Edward promised him that he would be king. He also claims that Harold Godwinson promised him he'd be king. So all of these things are coming together to answer our question, not as to how England was invaded, but as to why. Essentially, the king died, and these three gentlemen, because Harold Hadrada believed, well, I am a descendant of the previous king, that makes me a rightful claimant as well. So all three of these gentlemen believe they've got the right to claim the Kingdom of England. So this is the why England would be invaded. Now, obviously, Harold Godwinson can't invade England. He's in England already. So the invasions can only come from William, Duke of Normandy, and Harold Hadrada, the King of Norway. And that's exactly what happens. Harold Hadrada, if I just go back one slide, Harold Hadrada is the first to make his move. He invades England in the north. And at first, he's somewhat successful, okay? Now, he has a bit of a success at a battle called the Battle of Fulford Gate, but this success is limited because King Harold arrives with his army and they fight something called the Battle of Stamford Bridge. And here's basically how it goes down, okay? King Harold sneaks up. He arrives early before everyone is ready. So the battle starts relatively badly for Harold Hadrada, the Viking, and his men. Some are not even in armor. They've left it at a different camp. And this is not going well. But these are Vikings. They're fierce warriors, so they seem to be winning. Now, this is why it's called the Battle of Stamford Bridge. In order to attack and wipe out Hadrada's army, Harold Godwinson had to cross a bridge. This bridge is guarded by a Viking soldier, particularly called a berserker. And he is going berserk. He is absolutely mad with battle lust, with battle rage. He loves fighting. And he kills at least 40 men. Now, this makes everyone so afraid to attempt to cross that he is no longer facing a challenge. So they don't know what to do. So they come up with a very clever plan. They put some people in a boat. They go under the bridge. They sneak under the bridge and they stab this Viking from below. And when this berserker falls, all of a sudden, Harold Godwinson's soldiers stream across the bridge. As they get across this bridge, they wipe out the rest of the Vikings because a lot of them, as we said, don't have armor. They've just woken up. They weren't feeling great. And they are victorious. Hadrada, the first claimant to the throne, is killed. Harold Godwinson's own brother, Tostig, who was supporting the Viking invasion, is also killed. Harold is the winner. Now, remember, Hadrada's army arrived with 300 ships worth of soldiers, but they only need 24 ships to take their army home. That's how wiped out they are. Now, Harold is feeling great at this point, but then they get some bad news. Not only have we had an invasion in the north, we've now just had an invasion in the south. William of Normandy has brought his army across the Channel from France. So this is a problem. Now, in terms of the battles, battle number 1 and battle number 2 that have taken place so far, we've talked about the Battle of Stamford Bridge. Now, before that was this one I mentioned, the Battle of Gate Fulford, the Battle of Fulford Gate, as it is sometimes known. Now, this was a battle between the Viking forces and some earls and thanes up north in England. And the Vikings think, we've got this, we're awesome, we beat them, we can never lose. And this false sense of confidence is why they weren't ready for Harold Godwinson to turn up again on the Battle of Stamford Bridge. Now, these battles are only 5 days apart. So one of the reasons that the Vikings may have lost the second battle is they might have still been tired from that first battle. Now, this could be important because if you've just recently fought a battle and you're tired, it makes it likely you might lose the next one. So let's talk about the next one. Maybe you've heard of it, maybe you haven't, but it's called the Battle of Hastings. Now, this takes place on the 14th of October, 1066. So the Battle of Hastings, the 14th of October, 1066. The Battle of Hastings, 14th of October, 1066. Battle of Hastings, 14th of October, 1066. You'll never forget that date now. Okay? Now, this is important because as we saw in these two battles, they're only 5 days apart. And one of the reasons the Vikings might have lost is because they're so tired. Now, this battle is seemingly 2 weeks later, so fatigue shouldn't be a problem, except, of course, for this factor. The fact is that William has come across in late September and he's been able to rest for a couple of weeks. But Harold Godwinson's armies had to march all the way from the north of England all the way to the south over 2 weeks, carrying all their swords, carrying all their shields. So they did march as quickly as they could, but because they were going so fast, that's another reason they were so tired. So William had been waiting for him essentially at this place called Pevensey, where he originally landed, and he landed with 700 ships. Now keep in mind, the Vikings landed with 300. William has landed with 700. Now, as he starts marching, he actually meets Harold Godwinson's army at a place called Senlac Hill, which is near the town of Hastings, which is why it's called the Battle of Hastings. Now, Harold's army are at the top of this hill. Now, if you're at the top of the hill, you should play defense. That's the best way you've got to win your battle, to win a victory. So that's exactly what they do. They form something called a shield wall. And the Normans are not able to get through it. They've got the challenge of trying to get uphill and past a shield wall. Now, that may be proving challenging. So the Normans come up with a plan. They pretended to run away. Now, when they pretend to run away, some of the Anglo-Saxons, some of Harold Godwin's men, decide to give chase. They're like, this is our chance to wipe them out. This is our chance to win for real. But as they try and chase them down the hill, they come out of formation, and this breaks the shield wall. So the Normans, who are only pretending to run away, all of a sudden turn around and attack the Saxons. And they are able to get past them because they're no longer in this shield wall. And they come with things that the Harold Godwin's army did not have, such as knights on horseback and crossbows. Now, this means we've got knights on horseback. We've got archers with crossbows and foot soldiers, whereas Harold only had foot soldiers with axes and spears and swords. A lot of them were actually only part-time soldiers who were basically farmers for most of the time. Now, as a result of this battle, Harold himself, Harold Godwinson, King of England, is killed. So this is a Norman victory. The Normans have defeated the Anglo-Saxons. So now we should hopefully know why they invaded, a fight over who should be king after the death of Edward the Confessor. We should also come to understand how they were able to win. Because before this battle, there was the battle at Stamford Bridge, which is tiring in itself, but then Harold's army had to walk all the way home. Now, we also end up with a situation where Harold is killed at the Battle of Hastings. So the English have lost their main general. And of course, we've got skilled and very, very experienced fighters on the Norman side. Another thing that happened is, of course, they've just fought at Stamford Bridge. They lost a lot of their best soldiers. So not only have we got them fighting against excellent soldiers in the Normans, but they've lost some of their best fighters in the previous battle. Now, William arranged his troops very well. He used them very skillfully, and they used this particular trick, pretending to run away. And this is where we get our final factors. The battle began before Harold and his troops were fully ready, because they've just marched all the way down, and William was very skillful and ambitious. The Normans had prepared very, very carefully. They had had time to rest, they had had time to be well fed, they'd had time to train, whereas Harold's army had to march as quickly as possible to get into the south of England. So now I hope we understand how and why they invaded and how and why it was successful. Now, there are many, many different things we could put this down to. William could have won simply because of his tactic, using knights against a shield wall, the feigned retreat, the different tactics they tried. It could have been because of how William arranged and planned for the Channel crossing. It could have been the fact that William knew he had a castle already built that he could return to. Something called the harrying of the surrounding area. Essentially, William deliberately was goading Harold Godwinson to march towards him, because you might think, why couldn't the Anglo-Saxons simply not march all the way south? They could have just stopped and rested. But William and his army were destroying the area where they had just landed, making sure Harold had to come and defend it. So this meant William did not have to march up north through England, and it forced Harold to have to march even more. Now, we've also got the lack of archers, or the breaking of the shield wall by the English. This could be mistakes made by the English. And of course, the fact is, Harold may have made some mistakes as well. So all of these things combine to ensure a Norman victory, if we will. Now, in terms of how this goes, just to make sure we're clear, it goes like this. It's all about 1066. Edward the Confessor had died. in January, on the 5th of January. When he died, supposedly he'd named Harold Godwinson king. So this is why Harold Godwinson is crowned. Now, Harold Godwinson is aware that there might be other people, say, for example, William of Normandy or Harald Hadrada from Norway, who may not be so happy with this immediate crowning of him as king because they believe they may have been king. So he puts troops along the south coast. Now, Tostig has sails to England but leaves when he sees Harold's army. So he's done some scouting for Harald Hadrada, and Harold stands his army down. So this is a big mistake. Now we can see in January he's ready for an invasion. By September, which has been 7 months, 9 months at this point, I should say, he's probably thinking, oh, well, there's no invasion coming. So he stands his army down. It's when he stands his army down that the Vikings invade. So we can see that was a big mistake made by Harold. When the Vikings invaded, this leads to a confrontation between Godwinson and Hadrada at Stamford Bridge. Now, the Vikings had their initial victory at Fulford Gate, or Gate Fulford, but they're tired from that battle. And just 5 days later, they've got to fight another one. This is a big factor as to why they lose. Now, whilst they win this battle on the 25th, the Normans have landed 3 days later. And so Harold gets his forces together, he organizes everything, gets a head count, and he marches as fast as he can down south. Facing William in the Battle of Hastings, 14th of October, 1066. You'll never forget that. 14th of October, 1066. 14th of October, 1066. Now, we've understood why there was an invasion, how they invaded, how they won that initial battle. But why was this invasion so successful that William was able to take over all of England? Well, this is a combination of many events. First of all, there is the fact that he is a legitimate successor. So because he was technically a cousin, so he's a blood relative, and Edward had supposedly promised him that he could be king, this made some people in England see him as a rightful king and therefore not oppose him. Also, William is very, very clever. He makes sure that anyone in England who is in a position of power, if they own any land, if they have any power whatsoever, he calls them to a location, for example, Salisbury, and makes them swear a public oath that they will support him. Furthermore, we've got to understand that he is, in fact, a very skilled warrior. He knows how to win a war. He knows how to win a battle. So anyone who does come up against him, William is prone to defeat them. So because of this, he travels around England and he meets important families and he makes deals. He makes sure they support him and he makes sure that he is seen being supported by the powerful families as well. He does a bit of a technical thing with the land. There'll be more about that in a future video in terms of linking it all to the king. So this meant that he had the ability to take the land away from powerful people around England, meaning they had to support him or face the consequences. He also did a very clever thing, which was basically be in charge of the economy in terms of this thing called coinage, okay? The only thing you could use for actual currency was the official coinage, the official documents called writs that William himself supported. So if you wanted to spend money, you had to please William and you had to be acknowledging that William was in charge. And this is a very important one. At his coronation, he was anointed with sacred oil and promised to keep Edward's laws. Remember, Edward was a successful and powerful king before him. And he began a tradition of being seen wearing his crown 3 times a year. Now, in terms of this royal ceremony, it was at a very particular place, maybe you've heard of it, called Westminster Abbey. He is crowned king 25th of December, 1066. Every English ruler since then has been crowned at this particular abbey, Westminster Abbey. So this means that through the year 1066, 5th of January, Edward the Confessor was king. 6th of January, Harold Godwinson was king. But by the 25th of December, William of Normandy, who would forever be known as William the Conqueror, is king. So 1066 can be known as the year of 3 kings. So we should now have an understanding of not only why there was an invasion, but also why it was successful, how this invasion took place, and how William maintained his power. I wish you all the best in your future lessons, and I will see you next time.